Or to look at it a little differently, in a way it's like going right back to childhood, where a group of children simply come into a room or brought into a room without toys and begin to play. Grown-ups were learning how to play again.
So you would all sit together somewhere and you would play in some way, but what would you actually do?
Well, I could give you a good example. You see, we worked together for a week in the city before we went off to our forest. And of course, Grotowski was there in the city too. And I heard that every night he conducted something called a Beehive. And I loved the sound of this Beehive. So a night or two before we were supposed to go off to the country, I grabbed him by the collar and I said, listen, about this Beehive, you know, I'd kind of like to participate in one. Just instinctively, I feel it would be something interesting. And he said, well, certainly. In fact, why don't you with your group lead the Beehive instead of participating in one? You know, I got very nervous, you know, and I said, well, what is a Beehive? And he said, well, a Beehive is, at 8 o'clock, 100 strangers come into a room. I said, yes. He said, yes, and whatever happens is a Beehive. And I said, yes, but what am I supposed to do? He said, that's up to you. I said, no, I really don't want to do this. I'll just participate. And he said, no, you lead the Beehive. Well, I was terrified, Wally. I mean, in a way, I felt on stage. I did it anyway.
God, well, tell me about it.
You see, there was this song. I have a tape of it. I can play it for you one day. And it's just unbelievably beautiful. You see, one of the women in our group knew a few fragments of this song of St. Francis, and it's a song in which you thank God for your eyes, and you thank God for your heart, and you thank God for your friends, and you thank God for your life, and it repeats itself over and over again. And this became our theme song. I really must play this thing for you one day, because you just can't believe that a group of people who don't know how to sing could create something so beautiful. So I decided that when the people arrived for the Beehive, that our group would already be there singing this very beautiful song, and that we would simply sing it over and over again. One of the people decided to bring her very large teddy bear. You know, I was a little afraid of this event, and somebody wanted to bring a sheet, and somebody else wanted to bring a large bowl of water in case people got hot or thirsty. And somebody suggested that we have candles, that there be no artificial light, but candlelight. And I remember watching people preparing for this evening. Of course, there was no makeup and there were no costumes, but it was exactly the way that people prepare for a performance. You know, people were sort of taking off their jewelry and their watches and stowing it away and making sure it's all secure. And then slowly, people arrived, the way they would arrive at the theater, in 1s and 2s and 10s and 15s and what have you. And we were just sitting there and we were singing this very beautiful song, and people started to sit with us and started to learn the song. Now, there is, of course, as in any performance or improvisation, an instinct for when things are going to get boring. So at a certain point, although it may have taken an hour to get there, an hour and a half, I suddenly grabbed this teddy bear and threw it in the air, at which 140 or 30 people suddenly exploded. You know, it was like a Jackson Pollock painting, you know. Human beings exploded out of this tight little circle that was singing the song, and before I knew it, there were two circles dancing, you know, one dancing clockwise, the other dancing counterclockwise, with this rhythm mostly from the waist down. In other words, like an American Indian dance with this thumping, persistent rhythm. Now, you can easily see, because we're talking about group trance, where the line between something like this and something like Hitler's Nuremberg rallies is, in a way, a very thin line. Anyway, after about an hour of this wild, hypnotic dancing, Grotowski and I found ourselves sitting opposite each other in the middle of this whole thing, and we threw the teddy bear back and forth. You know, on one level, you could say this is childish. And I gave the teddy bear suck suddenly at my breast, and then I threw the teddy bear to him, and he gave it suck at his breast, and then the teddy bear was thrown up into the air again, at which there was another explosion of form into something. And these, what was it like? You know, there's something like a kaleidoscope, like a human kaleidoscope. The evening was made up of shiftings of the kaleidoscope. Now, the only other things that I remember, other than constantly trying to guide this thing, which was always involved with either movement, rhythm, repetition, or song, or chanting, because two people in my group had brought musical instruments, a flute and a drum, which of course is sacred instruments, was that sometimes the room would break up into 6 or 7 different things going on at once, you know, 6 or 7 different improvisations, all of which seemed in some way related to each other. It was like a magnificent cobweb. And at one point, I noticed that Grotowski was at the center of one group huddled around a bunch of candles that they gathered together. And like a little child fascinated by fire, I saw that he had his hand right in the flame and was holding it there. And as I approached his group, I wondered if I could do it. I put my left hand in the flame, and I found I could hold it there for as long as I liked, and there was no burn and no pain. But when I tried to put my right hand in the flame, I couldn't hold it there for a second. So Grotowski said, if it burns, try to change some little thing in yourself. And I tried to do that. Didn't work. And then I remember a very, very beautiful procession with the sheet. And there was somebody being carried below the sheet. You know, the sheet was like some great biblical canopy, and the entire group was weaving around the room and chanting. And then at one point, people were dancing, and I was dancing with a girl. And suddenly, our hands began vibrating near each other like this, vibrating, vibrating. And we went down to our knees, and suddenly I was sobbing in her arms, and she was sort of cradling me in her arms. And then she started to cry, too. And then we just hugged each other for a moment, and then we joined the dance again. And then at a certain point, hours later, we returned to the singing of the Song of St. Francis, and that was the end of the Beehive. And then again, when it was over, it was just like the theater after a performance. You know, people sort of put on their earrings and their wristwatches, and we went off to the railroad station to drink a lot of beer and have a good dinner. Oh, and there was one girl who wasn't in our group, but who just wouldn't leave. So we took her along with us.
God,